because this lecture is on the running assessment tool and how to actually conduct it when doing a running analysis. Okay, great. And now we'll be moving on to the expected timelines for return to sport, where we'll discuss the tissue healing timelines, the functional performance timelines, and then the documented return to sport timelines that currently exist. So recognizing that there's the one timeline where the whatever tissue is otherwise involved in the surgical procedure or the injury needs sufficient time to have its adequate integrity and capacity to be able to tolerate athletic-based training. But then there's also the functional timeline as far as the athlete actually being able to regain their strength, range of motion, etc., which is a bit more variable, yet there are still predictive components that we can share with this. All right, so tissue healing and functional performance time. All right, so this diagram that is put together by Axe and Schneider-Mackler in 2005 from the orthopedic section. You'll see it crop up in a number of different monographs put out by the orthopedic section as you peruse through these during even. Again, here's a high-level summary, just a different way of looking at it as far as the different types of tissues. So you have the contractile tissues in blue and the non-contractile tissues in red there. So one resource that I've put together that has been helpful for my own predictions of these injuries, whether they be operative or non-operative, is the tissue healing timeline in the physical performance Excel spreadsheet. And if you haven't already used this or I haven't shared it with you, it is in the shared drive, and you can see the folder cascade outlined here. All right, and then you would just click on the performance tissue healing timeline. Okay, you can notice that at the bottom of that Excel spreadsheet that there would be different tabs. Tissue healing timeline is the one that you want. Okay, so this is an Excel calculator that will help you. And then really what it allows you to do is you would put in the respective date of the procedure, and then you would put in the date of whenever you're accessing it. So I populated an example here for you. So say 1/1/2020. And then so you can either type in the date or you can use the shortcut of hitting Control plus semicolon. And once you do this, it will populate the days, weeks, months, how far out the patient currently is. And then it will also populate the predicted tissue healing timelines as shown in the chart there. Depending on, again, contractile tissue, the extent of the injury, and then the variability as far as the minimum and the maximum amount of time there, grade 1, 2, and 3, that you can predict or the bones that tissue to be healed, articular cartilage and or meniscus, and then the Okay, additionally is ligamentous injury and the remodeling of the ligament. So there was a great article that was published by Scheffler et al. In 2015 where they looked. All right, let's talk about the functional timelines now. So the current practice of time-based goals often do not reflect the athlete's functional ability at the time the time-based goals are reached, i.e., just because an athlete is 2 months post-operative or like post-injury of a lateral ankle sprain doesn't necessarily mean that their functional ability is regained at that time or their prior level of function is what it was and that they're ready for returning to sport. So if the ability of returning to sport successfully is related not to the healing timeline. So when you look at the current literature, specifically for ACLR, because we know that there's a multitude and a plethora of research that has been done around this injury. Post-ACLR is indicated that a high proportion of athletes do not return to the same level of sport, have increased risk of re-injury, and have increased risk of osteoarthritis at not only the tibial femoral joint, but also at the patellofemoral joint. Okay, so we've covered the tissue heal, at least defined what is the tissue healing timelines and the functional performance timelines. What we also need to consider is the documented return to sport timelines. Like, what are the current expectations based off different surgical procedures or injuries? Okay, so a recent review by Vasta et al. Looked at the top orthopedic sports medicine procedures. So when we're considering the lower quarter and the surgical procedures that we'll see for each of the given major body regions. So when we're looking at return to sport timeline summary for the lumbar spine, these are expected when time points at which athletes will return to sport, and this again gives. Okay, lumbar spine continued. So when we're looking at the actual return to play, so 82% of individuals who undergo surgery for. Okay, and these slides again are predominantly for your reference, and they summarize not only the expected time point at which people are returning to sport, not only from a tissue healing standpoint, but also from a functional standpoint, and then when the literature has offered the percentile of return to play. All right, looking at ACL reconstruction and PCL reconstruction, that there's going to be quite a spectrum as far as the percentiles that are reported for those that are returning to play, and also considering what does it mean to simply just return to play versus return to their prior level of performance or their prior level of function. And so when you talk about returning to play or returning to participation per se, that you're going to have higher rates, 56 to 83%. But if you're really looking at those individuals that are returning to the competitive level that they once were, that there's significantly less numbers here. So as low as 13% and everything up to 69% have been reported for the ACL, and for your PCLs, these consistently don't do as well. And this is, I think, because there's not as much guidance for us with these, and there's consistently more research that has been coming out as far as like the PCL rehabilitation. OCDs of the ankle. So also you can see that depending upon the procedures that are performed, this will inherently determine their time point to return to play, and then listed out there for you is their